Hi, children. How are you today?
Hi, children. How are you?
Ellie and I decided to wear our mask today so that we wouldn't give you any germs. All right? I don't know, though. Do you think I can read good enough with a mask on? Should we take them off? Just let them see how stylish we were with them. All right.
Forcing the beginning.
Put it there. Then. All right. I will read you a book today, some midweek entertainment. Farewell to Shady Glade. Shady Glade was a towering sycamore and a cluster of willows and cottonwoods along the banks of a winding creek. Early every spring, hundreds of birds flocked into the treetops to build their nests, raise their young, and then go their way at the end of the summer. The year-round population of the glade was no more than 16, half a dozen rabbit, a pair of possums, a single skunk, 5 green frogs, 1 bullfrog, and an old raccoon. They lived there together in a peaceful, neighborly fashion. These simple woodland creatures were content to believe that nothing could ever spoil their quiet little world. They hardly noticed the big city looming up to the sky way off in the distance. Then one spring day, there came a deep, rumbling noise. The rumbling began early in the morning and continued on through the day. Then along toward evening it suddenly stopped. Each day it grew louder and more ominous, and by the end of the week the rumbling shook the whole glade. The trees trembled to their very roots, and the creek bed shivered in its banks. The birds stopped in the middle of their song and nest building, then without a word took off in a flutter and flurry and went streaking out of the glade in all directions. The sudden departure of the birds caused great alarm among the other creatures of the glade. They wondered whether it was merely the noise that had scattered them away, or if there was a threat of real danger. They quickly gathered in a frightened group around the wise old raccoon, anxious to hear what he thought about the mysterious rumbling. "It's not a train," said the old fellow, peering up at the railroad trestle that straddled the creek. "There hasn't been a cloud in the sky for weeks, so it can't be thunder." "A little noise never hurt anyone," boomed the bullfrog. "Just the same," warned the raccoon, "we better find out what it is." And he went scrambling up the towering sycamore, all the way up the twisting trunk to the very top branches. This is what he saw. Then, just beyond a hill, not more than 50 yards to the east, he spotted the rumblers, monstrous machines gouging out whole clumps of trees in one scoop, a ton of earth in one bite, leaving nothing but their giant tracks in the barren ground. And they were headed straight for Shady Glade. "We're in for it," muttered the raccoon as he scurried down the tree to rejoin his friends. He tried his best to describe the gigantic mechanical monsters, but all his words and frantic gestures proved to be useless. The blank, befuddled faces gave no sign of understanding. Then, with a long forefinger, he attempted to draw one of the machines in the soft earth, a hodgepodge of scratchy lines which merely confused them all the more. "Oh, well," he sighed, "the monsters will stop work before nightfall, and then we can all go see for ourselves." A long evening, after the rumbling had stopped, the raccoon led his little animal friends out of the glade and across a grassy meadow. When they caught sight of the huge mechanical monsters, they stopped dead in their tracks, trembling with fright. "Have no fear." He waddled straight for the nearest machine and went climbing up a giant wheel to perch on the top. "Have no fear," the raccoon said. "They can't budge an inch without their drivers. Right now they are helpless." "Then this is the time to attack," said the bravest of the rabbits, and baring his large front teeth, he leaped at a giant tire. The raccoon shook his head. "It's no use. You won't find any soft spots. These brutes are indestructible, all-powerful, and there's no stopping them. The Shady Glade is doomed." "What will we do?" they all wailed at once. "Nothing at all tonight," replied the raccoon, "but I suspect we have a long day ahead of us tomorrow, so you better get some sleep." There was no sleep that night for the old raccoon. He sat up in the sycamore, wide awake, trying to find an answer to their problem. Of one thing he was certain: they must leave Shady Glade. Where they would go, he had no idea. He had spent his whole life in the glade, and the trip out to view the machine was the furthest he had ever ventured. The outside world was a big mystery. The raccoon only knew that there was a lot of it. So he figured there was a good chance of finding another Shady Glade out there somewhere. At least they must take the chance. Early the next morning, the raccoons called his friends together. "There is no time to lose," he warned. "We must leave Shady Glade at once and go far away. Not just a little way, hundreds of miles away, where the monsters will never catch up with us." "But where?" whimpered a rabbit. "We won't know until we get there." "And how do we go?" boomed the bullfrog. "Fly?" "We'll take the train." This left them wide-eyed and speechless. The raccoon quickly explained. "We'll board the train from the sycamore," and pointed to the limb that went twisting high above the creek and up over the railroad trestle. "Not me," said the bullfrog. "I'll take my chance right here." And he leaped into the creek with a kerplop, and his 5 friends followed with a plink, 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 plink. The rest were all eager and ready to go as the raccoon waddled up the limb, and they were close at his heels. Halfway up, they were startled by a thundering roar as a giant bulldozer came crashing through the glade, sending an avalanche of earth and tree limbs tumbling into the creek. The frogs barely escaped. In pop-eyed panic, they came leaping up the bank and went hopping up onto the sycamore to join the others. They were all no sooner bunched together over the trestle when the train whistle sounded above the roaring bulldozer. "Now don't jump until I give the signal," shouted the raccoon. "And when you land, remember to land flat." When the diesel locomotive came rushing under them, the raccoon raised a finger. "Get set!" And as the streamlined cars flashed by, he gave the signal. "All aboard!" And they jumped, each one in a perfectly flat 4-point landing. Everybody but the roly-poly raccoon, who hit with a big bounce and nearly rolled off before he caught himself. Then he turned for one last farewell look at Shady Glade, a fleeting glimpse of the sycamore as the great tree toppled and disappeared into the billowing cloud of dust. In a very few minutes, the streamliner was streaking along at top speed in the open countryside. The rolling farmlands stretched on, mile after mile, wheat fields, cornfields, barbed wire fences, as far as an eye could see. Now and then they spied a clump of trees beside a creek and a patch of woods here and there. But if these places were anything like Shady Glade, it was hard to tell. They went flashing by much too quickly. If we should find a likely spot," grumbled the bullfrog, "do we take a flying leap off the train and break every bone?" The raccoon didn't answer, for that was the very thing he was worried about. "Well, I know one thing," continued the frog. "This train won't stop until it comes to a big city. I'll bet a hind leg on that." The bullfrog was right. Late in the afternoon, the streamliner gradually began to slow. Pretty soon it was moving at a crawl past junkyards and factories on the way into a big city. As the train rumbled over a viaduct, the bullfrog bellowed, "There's a creek for you! Anyone for a swim?" At one time it had been a creek, crystal clear and shaded by the willows. Now its banks were steep cement walls, with pipes spouting purple-green waste from the factories into the scummy water. "What a sorry sight," sighed the raccoon. "What a stench," squeaked the skunk. You know what the skunk was saying? The skunk was saying, "It stinks." It's kind of funny for a skunk, isn't it? The train crept slower and slower until it finally shuddered to a stop in the eerie gloom of a cavernous railroad station. "I have a hunch this is the end of the line," boomed the bullfrog, "and the end of us, too." "All we can do," replied the raccoon, "is wait and see." They waited while the station clock ticked away an hour. They watched the people crowding on and off the coaches. Streamliners kept coming and going, but still their train gave no sign of moving, and it appeared that once again the bullfrog was right, when suddenly the conductor shouted, "All aboard! All aboard!" The coaches jerked forward, the train rumbled out of the station, and on across the city, gaining speed as it went, until once more they were streaking along the open countryside. As the miles went rolling by through the long afternoon, the scenery began to change. Now the farmland was hilly, with more and more trees, and the old raccoon's beady eyes brightened with renewed hope. His friends didn't seem to notice. They were too travel-weary and drowsy to care. One by one, they dropped off to sleep. The streamliner raced on through the evening, then on into the night, past miles and miles of dense forest, winding streams. 1,000 shady glades rolled on into one, and only a few jumps away, but the first jump was the impossible one. At last, the weary raccoon decided to join his friends. He curled himself into a fuzzy ball and was just about to doze off when suddenly there was a screeching of wheels, a hissing of brakes, thundering boom as the cars came jolting together. The raccoon, the rabbit, the possum, the skunk, and the frog went skidding and tumbling halfway down the car to pile up into a heap, and then there was silence. What's happening? The train had stopped. Pretty soon, excited voices echoed into the dense woods along the track. "What's up? What happened? What is it? What's it about?" "Oh, it's a rock slide," growled the engineer. "Lucky we got her stopped in time." "More trouble," grumbled the bullfrog. "No trouble at all," chortled the raccoon, pointing to a twisting sycamore limb just a few feet above the roof of the streamliner. "Last stop, everybody. All off. End of the line." And the sleepy-eyed passengers from Shady Glade went trooping down the tree limbs. Somewhere below in the darkness, they huddled together to finish their night's sleep. The next morning, when they awakened for their first view of their new surroundings, they were overjoyed. "This is more like it," boomed the bullfrog. "Exactly like it," exclaimed the raccoon, for it was, indeed, almost exactly like Shady Glade, with a towering sycamore, a winding creek, and all the trimmings. To their horror, there was even the same deep rumbling sound. The trees trembled to their very roots, and the creek shivered in its banks. "It's not a train," muttered the raccoon, peering up into the railroad trestle. "But it could very well be thunder," he said, pointing to the rain clouds overhead. There was a flicker of lightning, more deep rumbling, and a gentle rain began to fall. "A little bit of rain never hurt anyone," said the bullfrog as he kerplopped into the creek. "You're exactly right," smiled the happy raccoon. "In fact, everything is perfectly right." The end.